Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this webinar, Values-Based Messaging, Using Words That Work. My name is Ingrid Daphne Krasnow. I'm with Berkeley Media Studies Group, and I'm happy to be here with my colleagues Shaddai Martinez-Cuestas and Heather Gellert. We want to thank the California Wellness Foundation for making this webinar possible and free of charge to all California Wellness grantees. We are going to take just about an hour today to talk about how to develop messages that are customized with values that are pertinent to your specific audience, and how to be effective in achieving your policy change goals in doing so. But before we get started, I want to invite my colleague Shaddai to talk a little bit more about Berkeley Media Studies Group and what we do and what we'll be doing on today's webinar. Shaddai?
Hi, everyone. This is Shaddai, and just wanted to tell you a little bit more about who we are, and I'm sure some of you already are familiar with our work. We are in our 25th year, so been around for a while, and our work covers several content areas, including food issues, violence prevention, and many other health issues and health equity issues. Our work is primarily focused on three arms or pillars, which are, the first one is to conduct news analysis on how the public health covers health issues in the media, and how much coverage health issues really get, and as well as how advocates have used the media to advance any policy goals that they have. The second arm that we have is providing trainings to advocates, such as today's training, on how to use strategic communication and also leverage the media to promote their policy that they're trying to change or make any systems change. And lastly, the work that we do, we also collaborate and work with journalists and to help them improve the way that health issues are covered in the media. We're going to continue, and we just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping issues. If you have any technical difficulties, you can call WebEx directly at the number on the screen, which is 1-866-229-3239. You can type it. You can write it down because it's going to go away. And you can also send a message through the chat box to our host, which is Heather, and she will be helping us in the background. Then the last technical thing is that we have a chat box, and you probably can see it. And if you want to send us a message, or like you said, you can send a message to Heather if you're having technical difficulties, but if you want to ask a question, you can also do so there. And please make sure you select all participants, otherwise we won't be able to see it. So make sure you click on all participants on that drop-down menu. And just briefly about ourselves, that's us. I am Shaddai Martinez-Cuestas. I just joined Berkeley Media Studies Group a couple months ago, so I'm very new, and my background is in community health, and I'll just let Ingrid introduce herself. Ingrid?
Ingrid, I believe you're on mute. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Let's try that again.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me now. This is Ingrid Daphne Krasnow. I've been with BMSG for about 10 years and have worked with groups throughout California and across the country on most different public health issues that BMSG studies, and am now thrilled to be part of the California Wellness Foundation grant that allows us to do this work, as well as some technical assistance that you will hear about in just a few minutes, or I guess I should say later on this webinar. Thanks.
Cool. So just want to talk about today's goals, and like Ingrid mentioned, this is part of our work with the California Wellness Grantees, and some of you have been working with Ingrid more one-on-one, and we are building on some of that technical assistant work that we've been doing so far. And some of these questions or some of these issues have been coming up, so we wanted to give a formal training on this. So the first goal for today is to really hone in into the importance of infusing values into your messaging. We will also talk about how to incorporate social justice values in your framing, and we know that that's very, very important for a lot of the work that you are doing. And lastly, we will give you a tool to develop messages, which you will have a chance to practice today. And we want to get started, and we just want to do a little bit of a interaction. That we know webinars can be a little bit difficult to interact, but we do want to hear from you, and we want to get you start thinking about values, because that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So if you can type in the chat box some of the core values that you bring to your work, the values that inspire you, that make you excited about doing this type of work. So we really, really want to hear those words, those values. So just think about those and just type them in. If you have more than one, please do that too.
Hi, everyone. This is your webinar host, Heather. It sounds like a couple of people are having trouble with audio. I'm going to try to troubleshoot that with them separately. And Shaddai and Ingrid, I just want to make sure that you both know that you are on mute right now.
Well, we got some great values in there. I want to thank everyone for sharing those. Those definitely are some of the values that inspire all of us as well. Shaddai, was there anything else that you wanted to say regarding the value question before we move on? Okay, so it sounds like we may be having some audio difficulty with Shaddai's connection. So I'll just continue the conversation. Shaddai, I hope you can join us when you're back.
Now, why don't we try that again? Shaddai, you should be off mute.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not sure how much was heard, but I just wanted to highlight the importance of values for your messaging strategies. And so just as these values are important to you, they will be important to your audiences. So that's something that's really, really important for everyone to keep in mind as you develop your messages. And we will talk more about this during the webinar on how to incorporate these values, because a lot of the work that we do is deeply rooted in these values.
Thanks so much, Shaddai. And thanks again to all of you for sharing these important values. I want to ask you to do another exercise that's going to continue this conversation around values. I want you to take a look at this slide and just think to yourself what you notice about this slide. What are the elements of the photograph that you've noticed? Who is in the photograph? What is this person doing? What do you know about this person based on the information that you have? You are free to share this in the chat box if you'd like, or just jot it down on a piece of paper next to you, or just keep it in your head as we go through. But I think that the most important piece is just noticing some of the assumptions that we're making based on the amount of information that we have in what is essentially a portrait of this person. So my thoughts initially are, there's a woman in the photo. I'm assuming she's in her own home. I have no way of knowing that, but when I saw the photo, I initially thought she must be at her home. There's a plant behind her. She's pointing out the window at something interesting. We really don't know much more about her. She wears glasses. She's wearing a sweater on her shoulder, so you know, maybe her vision isn't 100%. We don't know if those are just reading glasses or she wears those all the time. She is maybe mid-50s or so. She seems to maybe live in a cool climate because she has this sweater on. Other than that, we don't know too much about her, but we've made a lot of assumptions based on this photograph. Now, what's interesting about this is if we broaden the frame, so right now we're in this portrait frame. We just have the image of her with a little bit of background information. If we broaden the frame to more of a landscape perspective, thanks, Colin, for sharing your thoughts. I just saw these in chats coming in. We broaden this frame to more of a landscape perspective. We learned some pretty significant information. She's clearly pointing at, well, we think she's pointing at these smokestacks, or maybe a bird flying up high that we can't see, but I think it's a safe assumption that she's pointing at the smokestacks that are clearly very close to where she is. Again, we don't know if she's in her home or if she lives close to where she is in the photograph, but we could probably make some assumptions that if she lives in this area, she could face some pretty significant health consequences from this pollution that's coming out of these smokestacks. So maybe she has some health issues related to the pollution. Maybe she has children in the home who are affected by this. But we learn much more about this person once we broaden this landscape frame. We broaden the frame to become a landscape. Essentially, we're bringing in more information than we had when we were just looking at the individual. When we're just looking at the individual, like in this slide, we have a pretty limited amount of information. When we broaden the frame to look at the whole landscape, we have much more information to understand what are the factors in this person's environment that are outside the individual's control. And that's a really important piece of our message strategy. A lot of times people will call the MSG and want to jump right into message strategy and ask us, well, how can I develop the best communications plan to advance my campaign? And we say, well, we need to know some information from you first. Actually, the way that we look at it is that message isn't first. Learning about all of this background information, understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve, what is the solution that you're putting forward, and why is it so important? Those are the factors that go into developing your communication strategy first and foremost. So when we work with you in these trainings, in person, in coalition work, through the materials that we have and share with the community, our question is always, what is it that you're trying to change? And how do you propose changing that problem? And then one of the core reasons that we're here today is, why do you want it to be changed? We go back to those values that you all shared about the work that you do and what inspires you every day. And we say, why is it so important that we make this progress forward? So those are the questions that we want to be asking when we're thinking about our communication strategy. And so the way that we conceptualize this at Berkeley Media Studies Group is in what we call the layers of strategy. And there are essentially 4 basic layers, and I think Heather will be sending out a link to, a handout that's really helpful if you keep it nearby at your desk or on a bulletin board. It's a helpful way to think about communication. And basically what it is these 4 different layers that begins with overall strategy. Overall strategy is essentially, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Why do you want to solve it? Just thinking about the answers to the questions. You're not thinking so much about the language you're using. You're not thinking about any of your wordsmithing or any of those things, but you're really just thinking about what is the problem that you're trying to address, first and foremost, and who has the power to make the change that you're seeking. And what does that person need to do in order to create the change? Is it a policy issue? Do you need to work with a legislator? Is it a funding issue? Is it a coalition building issue? Are there relationships that you need to be building? So these are all of the questions that you'll be asking yourself in your overall strategy. And Heather just sent that link out, so if you want to pull that up as we're going through that, that will help you go through this. Then we have media strategy, which is essentially, okay, you've identified the problem you want to solve, the solution that you think is the most valuable to help you get there, who is in a position of power to create change, and why you think this change is so important. Then you want to think about, how am I going to communicate with my target? If my target is at the state legislature, how am I going to reach that person? Is it going to be directly through one-on-one meeting? That's always going to be the most effective. But if not, are there other channels that can help me reach my target? And as you know, as Shadai explained, one of the things that BMSG does is study how the media is used as a vehicle for policy change. So how are we able to reach our target audiences by communicating with them through mass media, through social media, through traditional broadcast media, all of these different methods, press conferences, all of these channels that allow us to send a message to our target without having that in-person relationship. There's also a consideration of, is working with the media going to be the most effective way to reach our target? Sometimes having that one-on-one meeting is going to be much more effective than, blasting someone in some negative news in the news media. So understanding, is the news media going to be effective, or is it going to be a hindrance to what we're trying to do? And then thinking about, if we are going to be using the media, what are the tactics that we want to be using? We're here today to talk about message strategy, which is identifying not only the way that you are delivering your message, but what are the words on the page that you think are going to be the most effective? And this is where values comes in, and this is what we're going to talk about today, is what are the values that you hold that inspire you to do the work that you're doing and that are so important to creating the change that you want to see. But what are the values of your target audience as well? And perhaps more importantly, because understanding the values of your target audience is really going to be the most effective way of getting a message that is going to inspire action. So we're going to dig into that today. But I do want to just close out this conversation on the layers of strategy just by quickly reviewing access strategy, which are all of the logistical details. Like, what's the timing of media attention that you think will be the most effective? Is it right before the budget is passed? Is it when there's a vote on the floor? Are you working on something that's 2 years away from even being proposed as a bill? Is this something that is a small local issue, perhaps something related to your school district that's going to be most effective at the beginning of the school year? All of those issues related to timing are part of your access strategy. And also thinking about, who's your messenger, who's going to be the most effective messenger for what you're trying to achieve. What are the factors of your story? What are the story elements that are going to make this the most interesting to a reporter who wants to do a story on the issue that you're working on? And then finally, last but very much not least, is using news coverage to your advantage. So not only do you get the news coverage out there, but also taking it, putting it up on your website, using it in your social media channels, referencing it, in all of your data that you're compiling for your meetings and things like that. So it should not just be a one-time affair, but you're using and reusing that media coverage as often as you can. So that's the layers of strategy. Again, a really useful resource that we hope you'll keep close to your desk when you're working. But we're here today to really talk about message strategy. And there are essentially 4 critical components to a message. And this language is going to sound familiar. You probably heard me say this several times in just this short webinar that we've been on. But first question is, what's the problem? What's wrong? What is the issue that you're trying to solve? And one of the things that's important about this is, especially in the public health and social justice world, we spend a lot of time talking about the problem. It's just sort of our nature because we want to solve the problems that we see in our communities. And so it's important to identify that problem. From a messaging perspective, we want to move quickly on to the other aspects of our message, namely, why does it matter that we solve the problem? And this is what we're going to focus on today, the values element, and what should be done. If you pick up the newspaper, 9 times out of 10, you are going to see a story that is mostly focused on the problem and not as focused on the solution. And what the research shows is that people end up reading all of this news that we have in our world and feeling really hopeless, that there aren't solutions out there, that we can't solve the problems that we're seeing because the solutions are not being included in the messaging. So we want to make sure that that's a really strong part of our message, not only stating the problem, but why it matters that we state that problem and what should be done about it. What's the solution that you're putting forward? And then finally, who has the power to make the change? Who's your target audience who you are saying, Mr. or Miss Representative, this is what I need you to do. This is how I need you to vote. This is the funding I need you to direct toward this issue. These are the people I need to bring together to solve this problem. So really identifying who is in a position of power to make change. But again, we're narrowing in little by little on this values piece. Why does it matter? And that's really important because it's what helps you hold your audience accountable. So as we express in this slide, we're not trying to convince someone when we're talking about values and affecting change and having a convincing message. We're not necessarily trying to convince someone to have the same position that we do or have the same opinion about the problem that we do. It would be great if they did, and if they're inspired by the same things as we are, that's great. But that may or may not be feasible. What we do want to do is hold our audience accountable by using values that we know are important to them that inspire them to action. Again, they may be values that we share, but really we want to be identifying values that resonate with our audience to inspire our audience, our target, to action. So I know I've gone through a lot now. We're going to do some Q&A at the very end. So as we're talking, if questions arise, please jot them down. We will be fielding questions at the end, and I hope that we're not going too quickly through this material. So one of the things that's important about understanding your target audience's values is that as we learned with that portrait landscape exercise, we may or may not have all the information about the problem that we're trying to solve, and depending on our own perspective, you may be looking at the same exact picture and take away different information based on your own life experience, based on your upbringing, based on your language, based on where you grew up, based on how much education you have, based on all sorts of different factors. And so the way that you perceive the world is going to be affected by all of those factors that shape you as a person. And so it's natural that our values are also going to be different. So we're going to go through some slides now that look at very similar messages, almost identical messages, but the values are slightly different. And the intention here is to understand we may be trying to get at the exact same solution when we are developing our message, but we may need to infuse different values in the exact same message in order to make that message resonate with a specific audience and in order to inspire action from distinct audiences. So here's our first example of that. this is what we call same message, different values. So we have this message here. I'm going to read this one, but I won't read all of them, I promise. So children are healthier when their communities provide healthy food. We can all agree on that. But when neighborhood stores don't have a selection of healthy food, people simply can't feed their families the way they want to, and their health suffers. Okay, that's our problem statement. When neighborhoods don't have healthy food, they can't feed their families, and health suffers. It's not fair that people in our neighborhood have plenty of access to liquor stores and junk foods that have to take 2 buses to get to the grocery store that sells fresh produce. Okay, so there's the why it matters piece. This is an issue of equity. In this message, we're focusing on an issue of equity, that we have plenty of liquor stores, but not even one grocery store with healthy food. That's why we need the city council to work with us to attract a new market to our community. So there's the solution that we're proposing. Now, let's look at another message. It's going to look very familiar to you. So as a reminder, this message was focused on the value of equity. When we look at our next message, again, the prompt looks very similar. The first 2 paragraphs should look the same to you. Let's go down to why it matters. There's a great business opportunity for a grocery store owner to bring their products to our neighborhood. It'd be good for their bottom line and good for our health. So this angle is looking at the business opportunity for a market to come in and essentially sell products to the community. The community is longing for this store, and a business could be making good money by bringing their store to this community. The same solution, the same ask. That's why we need our city council to work with us to attract a new market to our community. So again, same message, different value. This first one was very much focused on equity. It's not fair that we have to take 2 buses to get to the grocery store, but we have liquor on every corner. This one is, hey, business owners, this is a great opportunity for you to bring your business into our community. Totally different value. Let's look at one more example. So again, same first 2 paragraphs. Third paragraph, why it matters. Having a grocery store in our neighborhood would not only provide the healthy foods that our community needs, it'd be a great source of jobs for local workers. Okay, totally different message, or totally different value, excuse me. This one is on financial independence. We really want to create jobs in our community. We want to increase the income. We want to help people get off their feet, support their families, and, no, I'm sorry, we want to help people get on their feet. And support their families. And by bringing jobs into our community, this is one way that we could do that. So we need the city council to work with us to attract a new market to our community. So again, it's the exact same message. We're asking for the exact same thing. We're identifying the problem exactly the same way in each statement, but we're addressing the values differently depending on who our audience is. And we don't specify here who our audience is, but you can imagine that, you know, the business community is going to be attracted to bringing the market in. You know, someone in with a perspective of creating more jobs is going to really appreciate this third version. Probably the first version is going to be appreciated by someone that's really coming from a social health or social justice perspective. Excuse me. Again, same message, but 3 different values in each different one. So one of the challenges that we have in working with different values and different messages is that there are competing messages in our society. So we are not only competing with the way that we were brought up and our own experience and our language and our socioeconomic status and our education and all those things. We're competing with these messages that are coming externally at us all day, every day, especially with media being the way it is these days, that we really want to understand how is society at large framing the issues that we care about so that we can understand the way that people are internalizing these messages. What are we up against, essentially? So I want to stop talking for a moment and go to another poll question and look at these 2 different messages and ask you to think about what are the values that you see in these 2 different messages. So the first one is the only, excuse me, I'm trying to broaden my screen a little bit. The only way that has ever been discovered to have allowed a lot of people to cooperate together voluntarily is through the free market, and that's why it's so essential to preserve individual freedom. That was from economist Milton Friedman. So I'm curious, just let's take that one to begin with. What are the values that you see in that message? And you can share this through the chat box, and just, yeah, please share it with all participants. Okay, so we see some values coming in: liberty, fairness, pro-free market, anti-government overreach, individual freedom, equality, partnership. Okay.
I also see collaboration here.
Oh, collaboration, great. I didn't see that one. Ah, great. Freedom, fairness, cooperation, engagement. Okay, so there's quite a few values in this. And depending on where we are coming from, we see all different values in this particular message. Some of them were similar, for sure. And I would say that one of the common themes around this message is that, you know, because of the focus on the free market, the free market is very much focused on, and even in this message says, individual freedom. So really thinking about an individual being in control of his or her destiny, right? Let's look at the second quote: shame on a state with Cadillac prisons and jalopy schools. Simple quote by Delane Easton, former state superintendent of public instruction. What are some of the values that you hear in that message? Okay, the injustice, social justice, equity, educational equity, our children must be valued. Underserved communities, education should be prioritized over incarceration. Great, these are all great values to share. Money being used in the wrong way. So again, everyone who contributed those ideas there are interpreting the message. I mean, it's pretty clear on what Delane Easton was wanting to say, but they're interpreting the message and they're saying, hey, this is not okay. The way that we're doing things by investing more money in prisons than in schools, that's not okay. That's not the way that we want to run our state. We want to do it differently. We want to value our children over our children's education, over the correctional facilities that we're sending them to. And so, again, this is broadening that frame and looking beyond the individual and looking at how is the environment shaping that individual. This is a piece that we've talked about throughout this webinar of making sure that the values that we are inspiring in people are not necessarily focused on the individual and their ability to change behavior, although that's an important piece of the work that we're doing. But we really want to broaden that frame to say, hey, we need to understand what's going on in the environment of the people we're trying to serve, the policies that we're trying to change, so that we understand what people are up against. And the values that we use in our messages, in many cases, we'll need to inspire that understanding. We need to inspire the idea that people are not always in control of their destiny because of these factors that are outside the individual's control. And so we're going to lead you through now a series of slides that have these competing values, these competing stories, where there's the focus on the individual and then broadening that frame to really focus on the landscape, the context in which we see individuals having the problems they're facing. So here's an example on obesity. And I won't read it all to you, but you can see on the left-hand side in orange, the basic concept is you're responsible for your body. You are what you eat. If you don't eat a healthy diet, that's your problem. If you're a parent, it's your fault that your kids are like this. This is a result of bad habits, and that you're not taking enough control over your life. Versus the perspective, that broadening the landscape perspective of what surrounds us shapes us. So what about all the marketing that we're faced with? What about ways that people can get from their work to their job? Are they able to take buses? Are they able to get in a bike ride on the way to work? Could they walk to work? Are they spending hours and hours in transit? Are they spending so much time at work that they can't actually get enough physical activity? So what are all of the factors that affect this issue of obesity? It's not just the individual's issue, it's a larger issue within the systems where we live. So let's look at another example on the issue of immigration. So again, us versus them, the inside versus the outside. This is just an example of someone looking for free handout. These are criminals. These are people coming over the border illegally who are trying to take jobs. This is a perspective that is very much focused on the individual versus sort of the larger community concept, which is these are people who are looking for a better life for their families, that want to contribute to our society, that are eager to participate in our country, people who are hardworking and looking for an opportunity to create safety for their families and for themselves. Again, we're talking about the same people, but the way that we look at it is going to vary if you look at it from that individual perspective or more of that landscape perspective. So we're going to ask you all to do some work on developing some values-based messages in just a second. I'm just going to ask you to do one more example with us. So this is the idea of employment. So why isn't someone employed? Why aren't they working to support themselves? This idea of like, where's your husband, quote unquote? Why are you not working, or why are you not married with someone who's supporting you? You must be too lazy. You must be trying to take advantage of the system. You must just be irresponsible with your budget and you're not taking care of your finances. It's all of those government programs that are encouraging people to just take advantage, versus there aren't enough jobs out there that actually can pay the rent, that people are not getting the education that they need in order to get the jobs that help them pay the rent. But it is the role of our government to provide support for families in our communities, but it is important to have that safety network. If someone gets laid off, that they have the support that they need to get from their layoff to the next job. So looking at that landscape perspective and our larger social responsibility for ensuring employment and ensuring financial security. So we've given you not lots of examples, we've given you a lot of kind of details on how to develop a message. Obviously, we've only been on the phone for a little while. This is the kind of work that takes lots and lots of practice and lots of study. But we want to give you just a quick opportunity here to practice doing this. And you all have been so participatory so far. I'm hoping that you'll continue. I want to ask you now to come up with a really simple message based on that model that we showed you at the very beginning. So what's wrong? So what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Why does it matter? Again, for this first exercise, the first time you're doing this, you can say why it matters to you. Later on, as you revise these messages for specific audiences, you can think of all different reasons why it might matter to your target audience. What should be done? Again, making sure that you're including your solution in your message with as much emphasis or perhaps more than just the problem. And then who has the power to make the change? So who is your target and what do you want them to do? Remember in the examples that we saw earlier on in the webinar, we said this is why we need the city council to work with us to bring a new market into our neighborhood. So who are you asking for action and what specifically do you want them to do? So we're going to give folks a couple minutes to work on this, and then we'll talk about the examples. We want to really encourage you to be a little bit vulnerable here, put your messages out there on the chat box so that we can talk about them, because it's not only a learning opportunity for you, it's a learning opportunity for all of your colleagues who are on the phone with you. So we know that it's a little, sometimes can make people feel a little timid, but we really encourage you to participate and put your messages out there so we can all work together. So I'll be quiet for a few minutes so you guys can do this, and then we'll jump back on the phone in just a minute or so. Hi, everyone. Someone asked a good question. Do we want you to share your messages, all 4 of the components all at once? And we do. So as you're writing what's wrong, what doesn't matter, what should be done, and who has the power to make the change, please include it, that whole collection together once you post your message. And it looks like some are coming in. So we'll let a few more roll in, and then we will we'll share some. Thanks so much. Okay, so it looks like we have some great messages coming in. I'm just going to start from the top with the first ones that came in. So let's see. Okay, Jeannie Kirk sent one in, but I think I also saw Jeannie's revision down below, so I'm just going to find that one. Okay. Problem. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world, with over 2 million people in prison or jail. This phenomenon has devastating consequences, not only for those who are incarcerated, but for their families and communities. Communities of color are disproportionately impacted. This matters because the American criminal justice system is I'm not sure if I know how to say that, retributive rather than restorative, and thus both counterproductive and harmful both to individuals and the society as a whole. Solution: we provide quality education to incarcerated people in order to transcend social and economic barriers and create pathways to well-being, opportunity, and economic success. The power to make changes to the criminal, my chat box just jumped up. The power to make changes to the criminal justice system lies with many different stakeholders, but an imperative first step is educating the public and humanizing the image of incarcerated individuals. Great. So first and foremost, I just want to thank you, Jeannie, for putting yourself out there, for taking a risk, for sharing this with everybody, and for putting so much time into this. I almost wonder if was there some language that you had written already, because it was so well thought out, which is great. A couple of thoughts. We can clearly see some values in here. So I'm looking at one thing that Jeannie did that we haven't even talked about is in her solution, she included her values in her solution. So you'll remember she said, we provide quality higher education to incarcerated people in order to transcend social and economic barriers and create pathways to well-being, so value on health, opportunity, so value on job security, building stability, and economic success, again, the economic stability piece. So those values are in there with the solution that she's putting forward. So, Jean, you're definitely on the right track here. I would say where I imagine you already know you need to go is identifying the specific audience you're looking to target in terms of what do you need someone to do. So when you say an imperative first step is educating the public and humanizing the image of incarcerated individuals, getting even more specific about that. How are you going to educate the public? We want the public to come to this information session. We want to share the story of, this group of people who we've been working with who have made incredible strides, and humanizing the image of incarcerated individuals. So how are you going to do that? And then what specific actions do you need to take? You need someone to host an event and you're asking for their support. Do you need someone who has a very inappropriate ad in the paper or billboard up to take that down, who's creating, a culture of fear or that kind of thing? So what is the specific action that you're asking someone to take? But because here we're focused on this element of values, I just want to commend Jeannie for doing a great job incorporating values. And again, depending on who your audience is, you just want to be even more specific. Maybe just choose one for each particular audience so that you can be really focused. So let me go back up to who wrote in after Jeannie. We have so many volunteers. I'm so thrilled. Okay. So Andrea, or Andrea, I'm not sure how you like to say your name, says, our local schools are overcrowded because there are not enough teachers to accommodate each class due to low salaries offered, while living costs increase. This is why we must urge the governor that state funding for education needs to be increased and better distributed amongst the public education system. Great. So you're identifying your problem and you're identifying your solution. Again, I would go back to getting even more specific. So what level do you want that funding to be? And then how do you want those funds distributed? So it sounds like what you're saying is you actually want some of those funds distributed to increase teacher salaries. You're not just saying you want to build a new gymnasium in every school, but you actually want the increased education funding to go to teacher salaries, so being really explicit about that. And then getting to the values piece, if you are talking about funding and you're talking to the governor, you may want to focus on, I'm trying to think here, we don't have enough teachers in our community because of the low salaries. If we want to have strong teachers in our schools, if we want education to be one of our highest priorities, we need to be attracting teachers who can afford to live here. And therefore, we need to pay them a better salary. So you're focusing on that education piece. You're focusing on the quality of the education. There are all sorts of other issues, that you could focus on with your values piece. That's just one. But I can see that you're getting there with your message. Let's do one more, and then I just want to open it up because we're pretty close to our Q&A.
Can I highlight one?
Oh, yeah. Should I? Please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just reading one, and I just wanted to emphasize that developing these messages are not easy, and maybe you're finding out that right now as you are doing this exercise. So it takes time, and the idea is that you come down with something that's very relatable, very easy to read, and that's something that's going to get attention. I see one that I liked, and I think I want to read it. It's from Oscar Rodriguez, and it's saying public charge will dramatically impact the enrollment of children into health coverage program. That is what's wrong. We're not going into the details about what public charge is, but it's saying what is wrong about it. And why does it matter? The health of every child is important regardless of immigration status. That's the value statement of human beings, health, children. And then in terms of the policy action, what should be done and who should do it, it says this policy change should be opposed, and we ask that our representatives oppose it. So that's great, and I think it's very synthesized and very concise. The only thing that wouldn't be needed to be added here is who in our representatives, and that's just getting more into the nitty-gritty, the detailing of the message. But so far, I think that's a great synthesis. Once you answer those questions, then you synthesize this into like a very, very short, easy to understand message.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Shaddai, for jumping in there. I agree with all of your comments, and thanks to our professor for sharing that message. I think we are going to take a pause here on our message development review, but these are the kinds of things that we can do with you in other opportunities. I'll chat in just a moment about the technical assistance opportunities that we have made available through the California Wellness Foundation. Shaddai, I think you were going to open it up to Q&A, and we're going to figure out how to field those questions.
Yes. So if people have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, and we are taking note of your messages, and we think they're really great and really important. So if you have any other specific questions about the content of today, feel free to put them in the chat box. And again, select all participants.
We do have a question that came in, Shaddai. I'm not sure if you're able to see it, but it's asking about whether the short values-based messages would be maybe most appropriate for social media, or what types of channels or outlets, because you were talking earlier about the importance of being succinct and the clear messaging. So do you think that social media outlets might be appropriate for that?
Yeah, I think what's really, really important, and going back to the first slides that Ingrid was going through in terms of our layers of strategy and our overall strategy, when we are defining who our target is, who the person that has that decision-making power or who can vote or do whatever they need to do, what are the media that they're using? And if they are in social media, then sure, let's send them a tweet with this message, or send, any other form of messaging. But you need to know where your target is looking, because that's a person that you want to persuade the most. Not necessarily changing the entire population's view, but as long as your message gets to the person that has to make that decision, social media could be a good venue.
And the only thing I would add to that is more of a general comment about where you're choosing to, which channels you're choosing to use. Sometimes, like Shaddai said, you are looking to target your message directly to the person in a position of power to create change, like you're posting something on a Facebook page of a legislator or that kind of thing. Another way to think about the channels that you're using is that when information is out there, when you are holding decision makers accountable in the public space through the media, even if they are not receiving that message directly from you to them, it's very clear that they are being held accountable in that public space, and the pressure from their constituents is one of the ways that that can be very effective in changing minds. So I just wanted to add that as you're thinking about the channels that you're using and the values, you can be focused on a particular decision maker, but holding that decision maker accountable in a more public space than in a direct message.
There's another question, and I think that'll be the last one, but we'll see. How deep, it's from Miguel Hernandez, and it says, how deep or descriptive should we be to deliver a message to state officials to address community concerns? That's a great question, and I think advocates tend to instinctively want to say everything that they know about the issue and why it's so important, and it's understandable because you're so passionate about it. But at the MSG, we have this kind of mantra that you cannot be comprehensive and strategic at the same time. You have to choose what you're going to say. So think about this concise message as your opening statement. You're leading with those values that are going to grab your audience attention and are going to frame the rest of your information. So think about it as kind of like the first thing that you are going to say. not bombard people with data and statistics and trends and whatnot. That's not going to go to the core values that people are holding.
Great, thanks Shadai. I'm glad that we got to include that. That is one of the things that we want to make sure that people come away with, this idea of not including everything, being really strategic about what information you are sharing with your target audience. So we're just about at the end of our webinar here. We want to respect everyone's time. We want to let you know that, if you're not already aware, that the Wellness Foundation has provided a generous grant to Berkeley Media Studies Group to do one-on-one technical assistance with all California wellness grantees, and we have this grant through June of 2019. And so what this means is, if there were themes in today's webinar or other themes related to communication strategy that you would like a little help with, you can get in touch with us. You can email me directly at daphnekrasnow@bmsg.org, and my email is up on the screen now. And we can find a time to talk, and so I can learn a little bit about what you're going through. Shadai is involved in this grant as well, so she'll be involved, and we'll be just learning a little bit about the work that you're doing, seeing if the work that BMSG does would be a good fit for what you're looking for, and then we can start to identify how we could be of help. So the first part is just like a quick phone call just to learn a little bit about what you're looking for and make sure that we're a good fit, and then if it's right, then we can work with you on an as-needed basis for almost the next year, for the next 10 months or so. In addition to that, we will be continuing this webinar series. So there's another webinar coming up in just a few weeks on September 26th. Heather, do I have that date right? I just blanked on it.
Yes, that's right. It's the 26th of September, same time as this one. Perfect,
thank you. And you'll get information about that as well, just like you got for this one, both from us and from the Wellness Foundation. And we'll also be doing some in-person trainings, regional trainings in California. So we'll let grantees know about those as well. Those are going to be much more general because we expect, a broader audience. So if you're looking for something more customized, get in touch with us. Let's talk and find out how we can be of help. So that's all we have for you today. You can find us in all different ways. Here's all of our various contact information. Please stay in touch, and please let us know if you have questions that were not answered on today's webinar. We're also happy to provide that. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank you.